They say milestones bring families together. But what if one becomes the moment your family fractures completely? My name is Margaret Delaney. I'm 55, and until that afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, I believed I was the kind of woman people admired: gracious, patient, dependable. I was the woman who always stayed 2 hours after the party to help with dishes, the woman who remembered your birthday even when you forgot hers, the woman who smiled through disappointment and told herself it was just a rough patch. That day, I wore a soft blue dress the same color as my daughter's eyes. Her name is Claire, and she had just graduated summa cum laude from Wakefield University, the first in our family to do so. My husband, Douglas Delaney, stood beside me holding a champagne flute and wearing the crisp gray suit I'd picked out for him 2 weeks earlier. We had rented out a private room in one of Charleston's finest rooftop restaurants, the kind with gold-flecked menus and cloth napkins folded into birds. There were about 50 guests: family, friends, professors, neighbors, everyone who had watched Claire grow from a curious little girl into the brilliant young woman seated to my right, cap still askew on her head, glowing with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Douglas raised his glass, everyone grew quiet, and I braced for the toast I thought would begin to Claire. Instead, he said, "I've decided to start a new life without you." He didn't look at Claire. He looked directly at me. And he said it like he was making a business announcement, a decision, not an apology, not even regret. I heard the fork someone dropped, the way the air went thick with disbelief. I saw Claire's smile disappear, replaced by a frozen, confused stare. Even the waitstaff stopped moving. 50 pairs of eyes flicked between me and Douglas, waiting for the inevitable outburst, the slap, the sob, the scene. Instead, I picked up my glass, clinked it gently against his, and said softly, "Congratulations on your honesty." My voice didn't shake, my hands didn't tremble. I simply smiled, the same way I had smiled through so many disappointments before. But this one was different. Because this time I had been waiting. I am Margaret Delaney, wife of 29 years, mother of one beautiful daughter, and for the past 6 months, I've been silently preparing for this exact moment. Claire turned to me slowly, her face pale. "Mom," she whispered. I squeezed her hand and kissed her cheek. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. This day is still about you." Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a cream-colored envelope, the one I had sealed the night before. I set it beside Douglas's plate, his brow furrowed. "What's this?" "Something you'll want to read later," I said, still smiling. From across the room, I saw Natalie, his not-so-secret girlfriend, flinch in her seat. She was sitting at a table with people who had once come to our 4th of July barbecues, who had sent us Christmas cards, who had known about this affair and said nothing. Natalie was at least 15 years younger than Douglas, with long auburn hair and the kind of laugh that made insecure men feel powerful. She had hugged me when she arrived. She had complimented Claire's speech. She had called me Margie. I looked her dead in the eye and gave her the faintest. Then I stood up, gathered my clutch, and turned to our guests. "Please enjoy your meal. It's a beautiful day to celebrate Claire." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back at Charleston sun, wrapping around me. When the doors closed behind me, I heard the sound of silence bursting into whispers. And then, Margaret, Douglas's voice I just kept walking, my heels clicked against the cobblestone street, each step lighter than the one before. He kept shouting, but I didn't stop, because I had finally started something I should have done years ago. I wasn't just walking out of a restaurant. I was walking out of a marriage. The air outside was heavy and damp, typical of Charleston in May, but it felt like fresh oxygen in my lungs. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. I didn't go far. Just 3 blocks to a quiet little square with oak trees draped in Spanish moss and a bench I had once shared with Douglas during our first trip to the city. He had held my hand back then, promised me we'd build something beautiful together. I sat there alone now and let the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders. Then I let it slide off. Because what Douglas didn't know, what none of those people knew, was that he wasn't the only one who'd been planning an exit. Mine just happened to be smarter. 6 months ago, I started noticing little things, credit card statements, that didn't match the purchases. I remembered ATM withdrawals in neighborhoods we never visited, small wire transfers to an unfamiliar account. I'd been managing our finances since the beginning, not because Douglas couldn't, but because he never cared to learn. That was always his way: dream big, talk loud, trust I'd take care of the details. He didn't expect the details to be his undoing. I hired a private investigator, not some dramatic trenchcoat type, just a quiet woman named Lucille Grant who worked discreetly and charged fairly. Within 2 weeks, I had photos, receipts, and even text logs. It turned out Douglas wasn't just careless, he was stupid. He'd been taking Natalie on weekend getaways to Savannah, paying for her Pilates classes, even opening a joint bank account with her under his name. The thing about betrayal is that it stings less when you see it coming. And I had. I had also seen our prenup recently, the one Douglas insisted on before we married. Back then, I came from money. My parents had just sold part of the family ranch in Wyoming, and I had more to protect than he did. Douglas thought he was being clever by including a fidelity clause, just in case, he'd said with a smirk. Well, Douglas, just in case, finally came. That envelope I left by his plate. It contained notarized divorce papers, evidence of his infidelity, and a court-stamped notice that all our joint accounts were frozen, pending a hearing. I had filed 3 days earlier and requested an emergency review to secure my financial interests. He thought he'd humiliate me. He thought I'd fall apart. Instead, I handed him a legal trap with a smile. I stayed on that bench for maybe 30 minutes, letting the distant hum of downtown Charleston wash over me. My phone buzzed, friends texting, confused and curious. Claire messaged once. "Are you okay?" I replied. "I'm okay. This isn't your fault. Celebrate. We'll talk later. I love you." The person I didn't hear from, at least not yet, was Douglas, which meant he was reading, or screaming, or both. When I got home, our colonial on Queen Street looked exactly as it had that morning. Magnolia wreath on the door. Curtains were tied back neatly. Everything is in its place. But everything had changed. I walked up the steps, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. The silence was thick. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom and opened the closet. There it was, 3 suitcases tucked into the back corner. He had already packed. He was planning to leave after the party, like a magician pulling a vanishing act. Except I had stolen the finale. My hands shook not from fear, but from a strange euphoric adrenaline. I took a deep breath and sat on the bed. There was a strange kind of intimacy in seeing how he folded his shirts, how he had zipped the smallest bag with care. I almost laughed. He was so meticulous with appearances, and so careless with people. I opened my laptop and checked my email. There it was, a confirmation from my attorney, Michael Keene, that the financial freeze had been approved and served. Douglas now had access only to the personal account he had tried to keep hidden. His flashy plans with Natalie. On pause. Maybe forever. I made myself a cup of tea. Saturday at the kitchen island. Waited. The door banged open an hour later. He didn't knock. "Margaret," he bellowed. "What the hell did you do?" He stormed in, the envelope crumpled in his fist. His face was flushed, eyes wild. But I didn't stand. I didn't panic. I just looked at him calmly. "You served me today. At our daughter's graduation. You were going to leave me after her graduation," I said, sipping my tea. "You picked your moment. I picked mine." He blinked, then scoffed. "The prenup has expired. You won't get away with this." I raised an eyebrow. "It isn't expired. Section 14 clearly states that the infidelity clause lasts for the full duration of the marriage." He opened his mouth, closed it. I could see the wheels turning. Besides, I added you didn't even consult a lawyer, did you? His silence confirmed it. Those texts you sent Natalie about hiding the account, the ones you thought I'd never see. I smiled. The court saw them this morning. His face turned red. This is vindictive, he said finally. You're not like this. Maybe you never really knew me, I said. I stood up. Calmly. I'm going to stay at Rachel's tonight. Rachel is his sister, a woman I once confided in, a woman who saw him and Natalie together months ago and had the decency to tell me. Douglas blinked again, as if the betrayals were stacking too high for him to count. Take your bags, I said. The locks change tomorrow. And then I left him standing in the kitchen of the house he no longer owned, no longer controlled, no longer deserved. I drove across town to Rachel's house, just as the sun was beginning to sink, casting long orange shadows over the marshlands and historic rooftops. Her place was a modest craftsman, with white shutters and a deep porch wrapped in climbing jasmine. As I pulled into the driveway, she was already outside, arms crossed, her short dark hair pulled into a clip the way she always wore it when she was angry. He told you, didn't he? I asked, stepping out of the car. Rachel didn't answer right away. She walked toward me and pulled me into a hug tight and bracing. Claire called, she whispered. She's devastated. I know, I murmured, my throat thick. I hated doing this on her day. He made that choice, Rachel said firmly. You just responded with class. Inside, the lights were low, and a bottle of wine waited on the counter. Rachel had already poured 2 glasses. That was the kind of person she was, decisive, grounded. If she had been the one married to Douglas, she would have left the first time, he claimed. It's not what it looks like. We sat in her cozy living room, surrounded by worn bookshelves and the quiet hum of a ceiling fan. She asked me what I had put in the envelope. I told her everything about the funds. I discovered the texts, the photos tanned his secret account. Her face darkened with every detail, and the prenup, she asked. Still valid. The infidelity clause is ironclad. He never read the fine print. Rachel smirked. That's so Douglas. An hour later, a knock came at the door. Rachel glanced through the window and let out a long sigh. It's Claire. She stepped aside, and there stood my daughter, still in her graduation dress. Mascara-streaked hair, pinned crookedly, like it had been hurriedly redone after tears. She didn't speak at first, just walked in and hugged me with a force that made me stumble a little. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered into my shoulder. I pulled back and looked her in the eye. Because I didn't want this to ruin your final semester. I didn't want to burden you, her voice cracked. He lied to me this morning, Mom. He hugged me and told me how proud he was while knowing what he planned to do. I know. We sat on Rachel's couch, and I told her everything. Every detail I had hidden to protect her. Her eyes widened, her mouth tightened, her jaw locked the way mine used to when I didn't want to cry in public. I knew something was wrong, she said. He was always on his phone, leaving early, avoiding questions. I thought maybe he was just stressed. You wanted to believe the best, Rachel said gently. We all did. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. A message from Michael, my attorney, the judge, had approved the emergency filing. All joint accounts were frozen. The house was legally protected. Douglas could not sell or transfer any property until the court date. I showed it to Claire. Good, she said firmly, her voice sharp. He deserves it. I nodded. But he's still your father, she shook her head. Not right now. The doorbell rang again. Rachel's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't, but he had. When she opened the door, Douglas stood on the porch. Beside him was Natalie, looking thoroughly out of place in heels and a tight blazer, clutching a designer purse like it could protect her. Rachel opened the door wider, but didn't invite them in. What do you want? I need to talk to, Margaret Douglas said, already pushing past her. I stood as he and Natalie entered the living room. Claire stiffened beside me. You need to unfreeze the accounts, he said immediately. We can talk like adults. Claire stood. Maybe you should have done that before blowing up our lives in front of 50 people. Douglas's eyes shifted to her. Claire, this doesn't concern you. Doesn't concern me, her voice rose. You humiliated my mom at my graduation lunch. You lied to me. And now you want money from her. Natalie reached for Douglas's arm. Maybe this isn't the best time. He shrugged her off. I'm not leaving until Margaret agrees to act rationally. Rachel crossed her arms. You created this mess, Doug. You want rational. Try accepting consequences. He turned back to me red-faced. You're being cruel. Vindictive. Cruel, I said quietly. You were planning to leave me the day after our daughter's graduation. You were funneling money into secret accounts, and you dragged your affair into a room full of people I've known for half my life. Douglas hesitated. Natalie looked visibly shaken, now glancing between us like she had walked into a movie she hadn't read the script for. Claire stepped forward. Did you know he was going to say that in front of everyone? She asked Natalie. Natalie blinked, clearly caught off guard. No, I thought he was going to speak to your mom privately. I didn't know. Douglas gave her a cold look. The cracks in their relationship were already showing. I think you both should go, Rachel said sharply. You've said enough. Douglas turned to me. What about Claire? Have you thought about how this affects her? I felt the dam inside me shift just a little, anger rising. Don't you dare use her now, I said, voice shaking. You weren't thinking about Claire when you booked that apartment in Savannah with Natalie, or when you lied to her face this morning. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He checked it and muttered something. Problem, I asked, calm now. She's already moved in, he said, meaning Natalie. At the new place. Oh, the apartment you applied for jointly. The lease with both your names. I smiled. You might want to check again. The leasing office flagged your application for credit issues. They called the home number to verify it. I answered. Natalie stared at him. Wait, you told me it was approved. I thought it was he, snapped. Claire folded her arms. So the whole plan's falling apart. Margaret Douglas tried again, more desperate now. We've been married nearly 30 years. And you ended it with a monologue and a girlfriend, I replied. He opened his mouth, then shut it. Please leave, Dad, Claire said quietly. I can't even look at you right now. Douglas hesitated, then turned toward the door. Natalie followed, her posture much different than when she entered, now unsure, diminished. At the door, Douglas looked back at me. This isn't over. No, I said, steady as ever. It's just beginning. He left without another word. Claire crumpled beside me on the couch. I pulled her close. I've never spoken to him like that, she whispered, trembling. Sometimes, I said gently, standing up for yourself hurts, but it still has to be done. Rachel came back into the room with 3 fresh glasses of wine. To new beginnings, she said. We clinked glasses. For the first time in years, I believed the words. The following morning, the light came in through Rachel's guest room window in soft slats, dust motes drifting in the silence. I lay still for a while, listening to the occasional chirp of birds and the slow, steady hum of Charleston waking up. The pillow still smelled faintly of lavender, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the dread that used to creep into my chest at dawn, the one that whispered I was living someone else's life, waiting for someone else's life. Permission to leave. Downstairs, Rachel was already making coffee. Claire sat at the kitchen island, still in the oversized Wakefield sweatshirt she'd brought for after the party. Her hair was tied up messily, her eyes puffy but alert. You're up early, I said, softly pouring a cup. Couldn't sleep much, she admitted. Too many thoughts. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a while. We just sat in the easy quiet that forms between people who have cried together, people who've had truth pulled out into the light like bones from the dirt. Do you still love him? She finally asked. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know, but because I had asked myself that question too many times, and the answer kept shifting like fog. I loved the man I thought he was, I said eventually. But I think I stopped loving the real him a long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. Claire looked down. I feel like I lost two parents in one day. I reached for her hand. You didn't lose me. You found me. The real me. Her eyes filled again. I hate what he did. But I still don't know what I'm supposed to feel. You don't have to figure it out right now, I told her gently. This is grief too. It doesn't have neat edges. Rachel came over and set a bowl of cut fruit between us. So she said, "What's the next move?" I looked down at my coffee. "I'm going back to the house." Rachel arched a brow. "Alone I have to," I said. "There are things I need to sort, memories to decide on, rooms to reclaim." Claire stood. "Then I'm coming with you." "No, sweetheart. You've been through enough." She gave me that determined look so much like mine when I was younger, before I trained it out of myself to make room for other people's comfort. "I need to see it," she said. "I need to stand there and know we're not pretending anymore." So we went. The drive was quiet, and the neighborhood looked the same: manicured lawns, porch flags, fluttering sprinklers ticking. But the moment I stepped inside our house, I felt the shift. The living room, once cozy and golden, now looked like a museum of someone else's story. The air still held Douglas's cologne faintly, and the pile of mail on the console table had a postcard from Natalie tucked between bills. Claire followed me from room to room. I paused at the wedding portrait by the stairs. We looked so young, so sure. I took it off the wall, placed it gently in a box, and set it aside. In the bedroom, I opened the closet and started making 3 piles: keep, donate, gone. His clothes went into the last one. The drawer full of anniversary cards I had written and he never read gone. The bracelet he gave me on our 10th anniversary, which I found out much later had been picked out by his secretary, gone. Claire helped silently, carefully. At one point, she held up a photo of us on the beach from when she was 7. "Keep?" she asked. I smiled. "Keep." We found a lockbox behind the shoe rack. It held old bank statements, a few mementos, and a letter I had written him during our 20th anniversary trip, but never gave him. I read it now. "Douglas, sometimes I wonder if you still see me, or just the version of me you've made peace with. I wonder if you know that I notice the long silences, the missed touches. I still believe in us, but I don't know how long I can keep believing alone. Margaret." I showed it to Claire. She read it then, looked at me with new understanding. "You were already slipping away," she said. "I was already gone," I said softly. "I just hadn't packed yet." By sunset, we had filled 6 boxes. I called a moving service. I called Michael, my attorney, and arranged to have the locks changed the next morning. The house wasn't his anymore. Not emotionally, not legally. As we stood in the driveway, Claire looked back at the house. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere new," I said. "Maybe Asheville. Maybe even Italy for a while." She smiled. "Italy," I shrugged. "Why not? I've spent 30 years being someone's wife. I'd like to find out who I am without that title." Claire hugged me. "I'd like to meet her." "Me too," I whispered. When we drove away, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Not even once. It was 3 weeks later when I landed in Florence. I had booked the ticket one evening on Rachel's back porch, wine in hand, and the warm June wind curling through the screens. It wasn't part of some grand reinvention plan. It wasn't a bucket list dream either. It was something simpler than that. It was a decision just for me. I rented a small apartment on the top floor of a terracotta building in the Oltrarno district across the river, away from the postcard crowds. The windows looked out over rooftops and chimney stacks, and every evening the city turned gold before slipping into lavender dusk. There was a bakery downstairs that sold warm cornetti with honey every morning, and a woman named Elisabetta who greeted me with "Buongiorno Signora Americana" and a knowing smile. I found a routine slowly. I walked the cobbled streets without a map. I learned to take my espresso standing up like the locals. I bought a sketchbook, even though I hadn't drawn in 20 years. One morning, I sat on the worn stone steps of San Miniato al Monte with a view of the whole city below me. Swallows darted overhead. The bells of the Duomo echoed like they belonged to another century. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt quiet. Not empty, not numb, just quiet. I didn't miss Douglas. What I missed, what I grieved, was all the time I gave up trying to be palatable, polite, pleasant. All the versions of myself I shelved to make space for someone else's ego. That kind of grief doesn't come with black dresses or condolence cards. It's quieter and lonelier, but also cleaner. It clears the way for something else. One afternoon, I got a video call from Claire. She was sitting in her new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and a very large tabby cat she had just adopted. I'm not surprised. She looked good, lighter, clear. Her boyfriend had left quietly after graduation, mumbling something about his mistakes, and to her credit, Claire hadn't cried over it once. She told me about teaching her native language and was thinking about grad school next fall. We talked for almost an hour. She looked at me through the screen and said, I wasn't quite sure happiness was the word yet, but I was something better than I'd been in years. I'm becoming, I said, and she nodded like she understood. Later that night, I sat by the Arno, a warm breeze tugging at the hem of my linen dress, the Ponte Vecchio glowing under the soft hum of streetlights. I took out my sketchbook and began to draw not something beautiful or perfect, just the curve of the river, the suggestion of a tower, the way the light kissed the surface of the water. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care if it was good. I just cared that it was mine. Margaret Delaney, a 55-year-old woman from Charleston, South Carolina, spent nearly 3 decades being the perfect wife and mother, sacrificing her own needs to hold her family together. But on the day of her daughter, Claire's college graduation celebration, her husband Douglas blindsides her with a public announcement he's leaving her to start a new life. What he doesn't know is that Margaret had seen this coming. In a moment of quiet strength, she doesn't cry, beg, or shout. She calmly hands Douglas an envelope containing proof of his affair and financial misconduct and walks out of the rooftop restaurant, dignity intact, while whispers erupt behind her. The story unfolds into Margaret's quiet but powerful transformation. With help from her best friend Rachel and a skilled attorney, she regains control over her finances, her home, and most importantly, her sense of self. Along the way, she rediscovers a letter she once wrote to her future self, a message reminding her she is more than a wife or mother. She is a whole woman. She clears out her home, begins writing again, and dreams of travel. Claire, inspired by her mother's courage, reconnects with her and starts charting her path with newfound independence. 1 year later, Margaret is standing on the Amalfi Coast alone, but not lonely. She has reclaimed her time, her voice, and her identity. She's finally chosen herself not out of anger, but from a place of strength, clarity, and peace.